Yeah, dolphins are weirdos to the max. There's no safe way to say this. They're horny. They are horny animals, and they are not shy about showing the world that. And you're just like, dude, what are you doing? Why? That's so gross. We have fifth graders in the amphitheater right now. Like, come on.
All right, Amy Weldon, welcome back to Tales from the Shift. Your second time here. How you doing?
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm super excited to talk about dolphins today.
Yeah, as a dolphin trainer, this is going to be awesome. So why don't you just start us out and tell us what a dolphin trainer does? How does it work?
Yeah, so a dolphin trainer is really what we used to call a water zookeeper. Dolphin training, I think the moniker dolphin trainer suggests that you spend all day training and playing with, and you have the ball out, and the hula hoop, and you're in the water with them interacting like some kind of mermaid. But in reality, day to day is physical labor. It's hard physical labor. It's a lot of public interaction. It's public speaking. And then, of course, caring for the animals. But the care for the animals is just that. Training is part of caring for the animals. So that's the boring answer, and we can get into the details. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's get into it. So let's start. First of all, how did you end up getting into that job? How did that work?
Yeah, so I was a 90s kid, and I think all of us had marine biologist on our list because movies like Free Willy came out, and I think there was like a remake of Flipper that was a movie. There was Little Mermaid, of course, like whatever. So it was kind of on my radar, but it was never something that I was dead set on. Now, I was very lucky to grow up in the Baltimore metropolitan area. So I grew up going on field trips to the National Aquarium in Baltimore. They got dolphins, I believe, in the early 90s. And so I just kind of grew up super privileged to be able to see these animals up close. Through college, I worked. This is all part of it. This is the long answer, but this is all part of it. I worked in pet retail. I wanted to have jobs that involved animals because I knew that I wanted to be a keeper, at least, either a zookeeper or work at the aquarium in the animal care context. And so I then got my first job after taking a class in a university called, I believe it was like informal education methods or something like that. My final exam was taking a bunch of little kids through the woods on a nature walk at a local park, and it was the best thing ever. And so I was able to get a part-time job at the aquarium as a weekend education aide. So it was my job to stand next to exhibits and talk about what was going on in the exhibit, the animals there, do programs. One of the programs that I did that was a favorite of mine was the difference between frogs and toads. One has bumps and lives in drier areas and that kind of a thing. And then through being there on the weekends, I got to really interact with a lot of the keeper staff, right? Oh, they're coming out to feed. I'm going to interpret for them. And so I got to know what time they're going to be there. What are they feeding today, that kind of thing. And I was in school for animal behavior. And so they knew that, and they would talk to me, and just that, that good old fashioned networking made it so that I was then able to pick up a part-time job as what was called a husbandry aide. So a big part of my job was literally watering plants and keeping the plants in the Australian, I think it was called the Australia Wild Extremes exhibit. It's the huge glass building outside of the National Aquarium, kind of closest to the street, and putting out food for birds and creating meals for lizards and things like that, and learning to get the hang of the behind the scenes aspect of caring for animals, things like feeding snakes and helping the keepers wrestle the freshwater crocodiles because they had to get medical treatments and things like that. So I loved it. It was just amazing. Then I was able to get a seasonal job, full-time technically, but seasonal, as a training aide with the education collection of animals, which anybody who's ever been to a zoo or an aquarium, there's the person that walks out and they have the parrot on their hands, right? Or the lizard or the snake. And those animals, we called them, animal ambassadors, basically, because they would come out and talk. Well, they wouldn't talk, obviously, we would talk, but to the public about them and their habitat and why they're ecologically significant, and why we should care about their home and protect it, right? So that was amazing. I got to work with macaws, birds. I never had really had birds on my radar, and I just have such an appreciation for them now because I understand their
So
behavior.
smart.
They're so smart and they're so social, and even the subtlest moves of their feathers mean something, you know? So learning that kind of code was really special. I was able to do that. Then I became a full-time assistant trainer there and helped to develop scripts for shows, where we would come out and talk. And by shows, I mean talks. We would come out and talk about, again, this animal is from the desert. You can see its color, and you know, this is the adaptation it has. And here's some debunking of myths that you might think about snakes. Not all of them have big fangs, right? Some of them have smaller teeth because they're constrictors, that kind of thing. I loved it. It was so fun. I really got into having like a huge crowd of people zeroed in on me because then I could sneak in like conservation messages and good stuff like that. And then the dolphin area, the marine mammals side, had historically done shows, and shows were very much by definition shows. They were scripted. You could not deviate from that script. You had to follow it. They were almost always conservation like based. Like there was always a conservation message with them at the National Aquarium. I know previous iterations of shows at other facilities were more entertainment, right? Jumping and magic and whatever. So I can't speak to too much of that because I never worked anywhere besides the National Aquarium in Baltimore. But um, the big transition came when the aquarium decided it was going to go away from these traditional, more entertainment style shows and into more informal education and presentations that were based more on what's happening in that moment. And for our training staff who had only ever known this memorized script that they could stick to, it was kind of like a safety blanket, like no matter what, even if that dolphin is like, no, I'm not doing that. The public doesn't know that, right? So you'd have to stick to that script no matter what was going on. You'd have to like, you know, motion towards the screens and like do the payoff and point and like whatever. It was all robotic and like completely scripted. And so when they went away from that, the training staff was like deer in the headlights. They were like, "What do you mean we don't have a script?" And I was very well versed, much like I am today, America, on this show right now, good at being unscripted, talking about, you know, maybe hitting talking points, but doing so in a way that felt more conversational and felt more informal and could be based off of what the animal was doing. Because parrots absolutely don't do what you ask them to do on cue. Thankfully, we didn't have any of that said bad words, but there's some funny stories about parrots that would be on microphone or whatever on a big amphitheater at different facilities that would then take that opportunity to say the one bad word that they know. And so you have to be able to riff, right? Like you can't be locked in a script when an animal does something like that. So again, I was never like a swimmer growing up, but there are some people that they know this is what they want to do. They do swimming in high school. They, you know, compete maybe in college. They stay active and have that a big part of their life. I knew how to swim. You know, I grew up on the East Coast. We go to the ocean, pools and creeks and rivers and whatever. But
Hmm.
it just became one of those things where I was like, I know that I can add value here. I know that, you know, I can also lift up the staff and encourage them and show them the way. In a way, I don't think I knew this at like 20 some years old, but I knew that I could do it well. And of course, it's a small place, it's a small field. People also knew my rapport with the crowd, and so I think I was able to come onto that staff at the time with that kind of objective in mind, and then being able to learn the ropes of like rescue swimming and getting in shape like along the way, because it's not like your first day they're like, sure, jump on in, you know. There's very much a process. I had also interned with the marine mammals program for a month straight, so they knew who I was. You know, they knew my work ethic and that I was more than happy to scrub buckets and not play with dolphins because that's the jobs. So that's the long story arc, but that was the
Okay.
journey.
So if I had to sum it all up, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, it sounds like first of all, there's a lot to working at a place like this. There's so many mini, I guess I would call them mini jobs, so
Yeah.
that everybody has to wear a lot of hats, right?
Yes.
So you're going to
Yes.
be doing this and this and this and this. So you're doing all these different things. And the way you would ultimately, I guess the question for if someone says, I really want to go do that, be a dolphin trainer, that the path you took is probably the most common path in, start out with some little things and then, hey, prove your
Yeah.
worth. And yeah.
Absolutely. I think that probably translates to most jobs too. Like just get the experience in where you can. Even if it's pet sitting, you know, dog walking, pet sitting, volunteering at a shelter, all of that counts because what people at a zoo or an aquarium especially are looking for is, will you show up when you say you're going to? Will you not put your hand against the enclosure where the bitey thing lives? Everything that has a mouth can and will bite. That is my motto. And, you don't have this like assumption or expectation that you'll get to do the fun stuff on day one. That's what they're looking for. And if you volunteered or you've pet sat, you know that 2/3 of taking care of animals is cleaning up poop and not doing the not so fun stuff. And that's what they're looking for. It doesn't matter if you don't have experience with tigers on day one, they're looking for that like routine, the appreciation for cleanliness and disinfection and stuff like that, and just being reliable. So
Okay. So at your facility at that time, how many people were dolphin trainers, say, at a given moment?
sure. I think the smallest we had on staff was probably like 11 or 12, and then we would bring on like seasonal aides for summertime for the busiest months. So we might have as many as like, I want to say like 15 to 18. And then we also had volunteers. We had a ton of volunteers, like at least 2 a day that would come in to help with a lot of the, like I said, buckets and fish prep and all that good stuff. So quite a large staff. And I think at the most we had 10 dolphins in the facility when I was there, but there was sometimes as many as like 12. Don't quote me on this, 12 or 14. But there was, I think now they have 7 or 8. So I'd have to
And
check.
when you look, could you look at them? You know their name by looking at them.
Yeah, it's funny because I'll go back and visit every once in a while, and I'm rusty at it now, but in once you're in it every day, you absolutely do pick up on their nuances because it's not just what they look like, it's their behavior as well, where they like to hang out in the pool, the toy that they like to play with, the behavior that they might exhibit more than other animals do. But yeah, on the surface, like, and this is where I have the deepest respect for in scientists that study these animals in the wild, right? You get that glimpse of them coming up for air and it's like, oh, that one scar, yep, that's so and so. So that's kind of how you do it. They do have natural kind of, I don't know what the word would be, almost like striations. Like they look very sleek. They look very like hydrodynamic. And so we had one dolphin named Chesapeake, appropriately. We always said she looked like she had Ray-Bans on because she had like one line right across her little brow that went straight back. Whereas her daughter Bailey, get it? Chesapeake and Bailey. Bailey is very light in color, doesn't have any striping, and had a very pink belly. So there's just little nuances like that that
Yeah.
once you get their behavior down, you can actually appreciate their physical differences for sure.
Okay. Cool. Cool. And then, all right. So let's talk about pay. I'm assuming they didn't want to pay very much. What are we talking?
Oh man. So 10 years ago, September of 2015, that was my last day as a dolphin trainer. I had 8 years at the institution. Obviously, this was several inflation bumps ago, right? So we do take that into context, but I was making $13.50 an hour. And the old excuse was like, oh, well, the fun jobs never pay well. And that is something that I think is such a like, it just brushes it off, like, no, we should be paying our firefighters, we should be paying our teachers, and we should be paying people that look on the surface like they have fun jobs, but they're really important to society and they're really hard work. So yes, it's a big it's a big thing that I feel still very strongly about today, especially because the women, especially because the field is mostly women. I'd say 10 years ago, the statistic that was going around was 2/3 of the field is women. It has to be more than that by now. And so yeah, I think there's a big part of that that plays into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big factor. It's still a factor today. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I'm assume this isn't something someone would stick with for a whole career. Like, could you imagine someone being 40, 45, 50, and well, now I'm making 22, and I'm still with the Dolphins. Like,
Right.
I would assume you get a lot of people to just move on because they're like, well, I got to go do something that pays
Yeah,
more.
yes and no. There's some folks that are still there that I worked with that are leadership now, and that's amazing. And I think it comes down to like money habits at the end of the day. And money has always been something that I have struggled to manage. And so it was just as much a factor for me leaving as just like I decided I wanted to go into a different field, but it's also burnout. It's also burnout. There is any animal. any animal job, especially on the domestic side, especially in veterinary and rescue work. There is a lot of empathy fatigue where you're just tired of seeing these animals come into the shelter and not leave, or come into the shelter or get returned. With dolphins, I didn't experience empathy fatigue all too much, just because at an AZA, which stands for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, the standard of care is so ridiculously high that those dolphins were never left wanting much. But it is a job, and we can get into it, that, requires you to be there nights and weekends. And oh, your friend's getting married? That's too bad. We're low staff and the animals have to get fed. Holidays, dolphins don't care if it's Christmas, they have to get fed. So uh, it is something that can burn you out physically before you're done with the job. Like, would I go back to doing that job tomorrow if I could, if it meant that I could actually pay my bills? Probably, just because I'm someone that doesn't sit at a desk easily. I'm someone that really, like, benefits from structure. Like, we had very structured, scheduled days, because based around the animals' feeding times, truly. And there's a lot of creativity involved still in being a trainer. So yeah, it is something that you can, if you're good at money, great. But in this day and age, I mean, most of the trainers that I know have at least second jobs where they pet sit, or they house sit, or they straight up work at Michael's. I ran into one at Michael's when I was home visiting, and I was like, "Why are you here? Did you work today?" "Yeah, I had fish prep 6:30 to 3, and then I'm closing the store tonight." Like, it could not be me. Could not be me at this point.
Yeah. You made me think of something. So you're saying, is it 24 hours, the facility? Obviously not putting on shows in the middle of the night, but that's probably a dumb question. But the dolphins' sleeping habits, do they
Mm.
tend to kind of sleep towards the night, or are they, tell me, are they more like a cat, naps here and there and there?
That's such a great question. There aren't necessarily trainers on staff overnight. We do have security. If there's something going on with an animal, somebody needs to have an eye kept on. Maybe there's a pregnant dolphin, which hasn't happened in a really long time, or there's a dolphin that has been showing signs that they don't feel well. You might have overnight observation shifts, but we're not interacting with them. We're not, let's go play. It's 11:30 at night. I always felt very much like that was their time. That was their time. So they might play, they might interact. We would come in the morning, and maybe someone has a brand new rake, which is when they use their teeth to, like dogs do, almost like wrestle and play. And there's like a big scratch mark across their melon that we would then treat with disinfectant just to be safe. But so they're doing something at night. It's not always just sleepy time, but I do think there's nobody pounding on the glass. There's no kids. They can hear extremely well, or sense the sound extremely well through the glass. If there's a big ship docking right out on the pier, they can hear that too. If there's pile drivers somewhere in the harbor. So I think nighttime is just a general quieter time. And as far as sleeping goes, they're definitely not getting a solid 8 hours like we do. The science says that they power down one hemisphere of their brain, and they're able to rest while their body continues to help them breathe, because obviously they cannot breathe unless they come to the surface. Helps pump their tail, helps them navigate, maybe even helps them socialize, and or at least keep in, I don't want to say an ear out, but at least keep a radar open, a sonar open for what's going on socially. So, and then once that brain feels rested enough, maybe they come back online and they're eating or whatever, and then they switch and rest the other side of the brain. We don't
Yeah.
really know a ton. We don't, as far as I know, I don't think there's been any MRIs on dolphins while they're awake and, interacting. So,
Yeah, interesting. You really remind me of the herons, about who
mm,
go aloft and do the brain shutdown thing. I don't know how many people are watching this. Then, I mean, I've just really just recently learned about how there's these different birds that'll go up for months.
the albatross.
Yeah, there's just, but some of them, I don't even know if they'll come down to mate, perhaps on land, and then they're back up and they're up there for months, and then they're shutting the
Yeah.
brain off, they're locking their wing, all kinds of
Yeah.
really cool
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
So true. The animals are they're just amazing. And yeah, that's a really good comparison. Yep. Exactly.
All right. What about the trainers and staff? What's it like working with other dolphin trainers and the other people on staff? Is it kumbaya, or what do you think?
It's funny, because I feel like when our kind of, if you will, class came into the marine mammals area of the aquarium, it changed the dynamic to one of very much of support and of trying to like be delicate here, but I do get the sense, because again, I wasn't part of the teams before me. I got the sense that there was more competition. There was more, I don't know. I don't want to like put anybody, in a bad position, but like I think there was a little bit more like reality TV moments going on, and like and competition and like,
Yeah.
frenemies and things like that. And then when my kind of class or generation, or whatever you want to call it, came in, it was a lot more like, hey, how can I help? You should go for that promotion. You should, not that there was ever promotions, which again we can talk about, but you should apply for that job. You should do this. You should go back to school. Like there was a lot more of a supportive, very genuine feeling of wanting everyone to succeed. And I think that's better for the animals. At the end of the day, I'm not saying that the teams before us didn't care for the animals as much as we did, but I think at the end of the day, when big teams get along better and they're more supportive of each other, ultimately the animals win from that. So yeah, when you're soaking wet for the third time in the day and you have to keep a dolphin from flinging your boss into the air with their tail because it's a medical procedure and everybody's all hands on deck, we have to get a blood sample. It's really hard to keep, that's a very different environment than corporate world, right?
Right.
Eating a Chipotle burrito like you're on the Serengeti after you've just scrubbed a pool clean underwater for an hour. Again, very surviving blizzards and stuff like that. Like it's a very different world. I think because we had such a lovely, and I think today still, I think the group that's there today still, because like I said, I do go back to visit, has a really nurturing, supportive, like just wonderful kind of atmosphere where they really support each other and go present at that conference and like go get them and go do that thing. And if you need to leave, that's okay. We support you too, so it's very different. Yeah. From like office world where I am now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad you all getting along, because I mean, I could picture a scenario where you have the shows themselves, right?
Mhm.
And then you have
Mhm.
certain people who would be like, well, I'm always the one who's in front of this, and I get the most lines, and I get the, whatever, I get to do the coolest, whatever you
Yes.
would say to a dolphin, you
Behaviors.
could tell us, but right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I could
That could be a thing.
see that being a competition or whatever. But if you guys figured that out, then hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
winning.
And there were moments of that, right? Like none of us are perfect. So there were definitely days where like some of us were avoiding being the ones to clean the buckets, and maybe we were out to the public talking more, or maybe yeah, like I want to be in the water all the time and everyone else is like, okay, but we have work to do, that kind of thing. But it was never out of malice for our team. It was just kind of a awareness, like, oh shoot, you're right, I need to be helping out more, kind of thing. I was lucky because I was one of few that enjoyed talking to the public. So I really enjoyed standing out in the amphitheater, answering questions and talking to folks. So if some of the team members were like, I can't people today, I'd be like, I'll do it for you, no problem. Like, I'll trade scrubbing buckets for the third time today for some more people time. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I would rather talk to people than clean a bucket, I think.
I
Yeah.
know.
That's
We're weirdos in the science world. We're weirdos in the science world. So
sounds like a better deal to me. Is there a person you would say should not do this job? People that should stay away.
I think, yeah, if you are totally against interacting with the public, you should not be doing specifically dolphins. Reptile keepers, fishes, go for it. Because people have big, big, big feelings about dolphins. They have questions about dolphins. They want to talk to someone about dolphins. They want to make sure the dolphins are okay. People don't have those same big feelings about crocodiles or snakes or
So
bugs or.
so it's a different. Would you say it's a different type of person then? The reptile person is not the same
So
as the dolphin person.
I think it's a lot of type A. It's a lot of type A. You have to be highly organized. You have to be, because there's a lot of record keeping. There's a lot of record keeping, down to this animal kind of looked weird, I don't know, to like, this is when we gave them their medication. This is, about the time we saw this interaction happen. There are a ton of records associated, and that's any animal job too. The vets always laugh at me when I come in with my pets because they're like, thank you for all of these notes on your dog's, poop. But
We'll take it from
they
here.
know, yeah. They know that I have that. I'm like, sorry, once a keeper, always a keeper. I've actually been asked at doctor's appointments for me, like, "Are you in med school?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just neurotic because I, kind of grew up essentially taking notes on animals." But yeah, type A, people person in most cases, and okay with uncomfortable situations. You cannot be grossed out. Point blank period. You have to sort through mountains of frozen fish to look for missing eyeballs and guts hanging out and things like that, and get rid of those things. Clean out drains, clean up dolphin poop. We had a dolphin poop vacuum because once it all settles to the bottom, it kind of rolls around and it looks like pebbles at the bottom. It's very strange. You know, Getting a chuff in the face when they exhale, that's a set of lungs just like ours. You don't like to get sneezed on, do you? So if that animal isn't feeling well, that's actually an indicator. You can smell kind of that like mildew smell when they
Yeah.
chuff, and you're like, whoo, okay, we got to let the vet know that like this might be fine or it might be something to keep an eye on. So you cannot be you cannot be a prissy like my hair has to be perfect for the public. Like, no, you're gonna be running around with probably no makeup on. We're not allowed to have pins or barrettes or anything in our hair. Most of the time, no nail polish, anything like that. No rings, no facial piercings or anything like that. And you're wearing, when I was there, men's khaki shorts, which is the height of fashion, I'll tell you. And, big rubber boots. So it's not, I always laugh when I see Hollywood's interpretation. I will never forget seeing, I think it was Ryan Reynolds, maybe. It's called Good Luck Chuck. And it's got, what's her name in it? Jessica Alba. And she's a penguin keeper. And she's just walking around with her like half unzipped wetsuit all day. No, penguins are the bitiest, nastiest, stinkiest, fish poopinest things out there, and there's no way she's looking like that if she's a penguin keeper. So also, wetsuits are sweaty. But anyway, so like uncomfortable, type A, organized, and a go-getter for sure. And physically, able to keep up with the job too.
Yeah. 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 What about, did you ever develop any, I know it's going to sound like a weird question, relationships with the dolphin? I don't know how you want to answer that, but I mean, like, that's
Yeah.
my favorite for whatever reason, anything like that?
Totally, and that was always one of the coolest parts of working in a team of people is to see who gravitated towards what dolphin and why. So one of my favorites was Bailey because she was still kind of a baby at the time, so she was smaller and she was just so squeaky. And her aunt Maya, she was probably my favorite. She was a favorite of quite a few of the folks on the team. She was chaotic, but in a controlled way. Her half sister Spirit, who's still at the aquarium, the way that I described it is Spirit would walk into, you know, a mall or something with a machine gun and just spray the whole place with bullets. Whereas Maya was a sniper. Okay. And so we're going to just jump right into how dolphins are not these magical creatures that everybody wants them to be. But Maya, like I will never forget one day, I told there was an intern and I was like, hey, while you're walking around the pools, you got to be conscious of where you are. Don't get stuck looking at the animals and trip and fall into a pool. They are aware of who you are and they know that you're new here. So they will try to mess with you. I said, Spirit, I gave her the same talk. Spirit will test you in a much different way than Maya will, but those will be the two that test you. And they're like, okay. And sure enough, later that day, Spirit, we had these big mats that were made out of kind of like a car wash strip material. It's almost like somewhere between an astroturf and a felt. And we had these big blankets of them. So they could like ride around. They would swim around with them on their backs or like, play with them underwater and all kinds of cool stuff. And Spirit would fling the thing out of the water. It was soaking wet. It probably weighed 30 pounds at that point. And that's exactly what she did. The intern was walking across the deck to go scrub something or do something. And she flung this mat and it totally missed her, but it sprayed her with water and it went out of the pool. And all the people that were in the amphitheater were like, that's so fun. Okay. So then later in the day, Maya, she's playing with her basketball. Don't mind me, just swimming around playing with my basketball. And as the intern was walking across a little bridge that connected to, I guess you'd call them decks between pools. So you're on this piece of PVC deck that's maybe 3 feet long and about 1.5 feet wide. the basketball comes flying at the intern's legs, right at the intern's leg. And she looked up at me and I was like, I told you. Like, Spirit is an agent of chaos. Maya is calculated, but they also had this side of Maya loved to learn. Maya was, super fun to reinforce if she got something right and you gave her that bridge, or that's what we call the whistle. She would squeak and toss her head around and just be so excited. Whereas Spirit was poor Spirit. Spirit is just she's a special lady that has a lot of anxiety, and so she, sometimes she's in it and she's like, yes, we're learning today, and other days she's pretty sure the like aliens are coming to get her and she just can't be at her station right now. And it's like, all right, well, it's Spirit's having a day, that's okay. So those are probably some of my favorites. Chesapeake, the animal that I mentioned earlier, she, to this day, the staff kind of refers to her as the straight A student, cheerleader, class president. That's like the kid in the front. That's like, I'm sorry, teacher, didn't we have homework tonight? Like, that's her. She wants to do it the highest, the fastest, the best. She is the go-getter. And her daughter Bailey is somewhere between Maya and Chesapeake, where she has her moments and she wants to be like mom, and then other times she wants to go poke and bother other dolphins. So yeah, you absolutely develop those relationships. And for a while when I went back, you would kind of see them be like, I kind of remember you. Like, maybe you had a way that you played with them that was special to you, or a way that you would rub them, or things like that. So now, if I went back today, I don't know that they would recognize me. We would always joke that we were just walking vending machines. They did us a favor by pretending they cared who we were, but
this is my favorite vending machine.
Exactly. She throws the ball just right. Yep, exactly.
I am curious, when you said that the dolphins do mess with people, what are some other things that they might do?
Oh man, so Spirit is a notorious bucket thief. If you have your fish bucket too close to the pool, she will absolutely take a run at it, and it'll be a free for all. The fish, the ice, everything goes in the water, and the dolphins most of the time can't avoid that temptation, and so the session is pretty much over at that point. And then she rides around with the bucket like it's her trophy. And let's see this, and they bother each other too. It's a hierarchy. Dolphins, both in human care and in the wild, are matriarchal societies, so they will live with big groups of moms and sisters and aunties and nieces and all that. And then the males live separately their whole lives. They only come together when it's time to make new dolphins. So once the males are a certain age, they get kicked out. And a lot like lions, they'll find another male, they'll pair off, and that's who they hang out with for the rest of their life, right? So in a human care scenario, oftentimes the female dolphins will be put on birth control in order to make sure there aren't any oopsies, right? Because dolphins aren't very picky about who they decide they're gonna interact with, I'll say that, but oftentimes you'll keep them separate, right? Just for everybody's safety, just for everybody's kind of like, this is the way it would be as well out in the wild. And so you'll have the boys over at the gate and they're creeping and they're looking through the little holes and they're not doing what you're asking them to do because the girls are over there and that's way more interesting. Or vice versa, the girls will bang at the gates that they have that separate the pool to scare the boys when they're swimming by. There's all kinds of dynamics that they're changing every day. It's just like any big family, any big social animal. There's a matriarch who's in charge, who mostly doesn't have to regulate. She is the queen bee, and that's Chesapeake in this scenario. And everybody else is kind of going at it for her approval or for a station, closer to the top. And so it's just interesting. It's really interesting to watch and to be close up and see. So absolutely, they'll mess with visitors. Every once in a while, you'll see a video go viral where there's a girl doing cartwheels at a big underwater viewing window and a dolphin starts to do flips. That was actually the National Aquarium, and that's the boys. The Bo and Foster are their names. And so yeah, they very much pay attention. They very much key in on people. I personally love to splash people as a trainer, send them on splashing behaviors because, especially if I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan, as I should be, being from this city, Baltimore. And so if they were Steelers fans, watch out, you're getting wet. Not in my amphitheater, you know what I mean? So, and then the dolphins just do it themselves too. If you're up at the glass, they'll thunk their tail and just completely soak somebody down by the window. So you just never know. It depends on the mood they're in, I guess.
So they know they're soaking people. They know they have the
Absolutely.
power to pull that off with the move.
Yep. It's reinforcement, isn't it? So it's like they see the scatter and the screaming and the like reaction, and they're like, "Oh, this is fun. This is all I have to do is hit this button, and that happens, huh?" You know. So that's absolutely, and you hear that a lot from great ape keepers. You hear it a lot from big cat keepers. Like they also know who interns are, so they'll go up against the enclosure and make a bunch of noise just to get that like rise out of them. So there's it's animals know what's going on a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you make them do the splash? If you're like, "I wanna get those people wet."
So I always like to say in the moment that, if anyone ever asked me this as a trainer, I would say, first of all, I can't make a 400-pound carnivore in the water do anything. If I would like to meet the person that could make, a 400-pound carnivore anywhere do anything, what I can do is ask them. And the way that we ask them is with hand signals that we called SD, which is the letter S, the letter D, and that stands for, well, it's switched really. It stands for discriminate stimulus. I don't know why we refer to it as an SD and not a DS, but whatever. But basically, it's like it's sign language, right? It's hand signals that they can discriminate what you're asking based on the hand signal. And so there was a very specific hand signal that basically was the motion of like me patting my lap and then pointing to which direction I would want them to go to. That would be, I think we called it a fluke splash. They would go over to the window very unsuspectingly and then tip upside down. And the people are just enthralled. They're like, oh, wow, it's standing on its head, whatever. And then that tail would cock back and then it would whoosh forward. And this is enough pressure. These tails are all muscle. These are the same tails that launch them 18, 20 feet in air, sometimes higher. That's a lot of water. And there was a couple other where they would like swim across the whole window and just do that the whole time. It just depended on what the crowd energy was like that day. Little kids love
Yeah.
to get splashed, but that's how it worked. And that's how we asked them for everything from the fun behaviors that you might see when you go to a program to medical behaviors, that help us care for them by basically training them to help them help us, which is really cool.
Okay. Okay. So, basically, how do you teach how to do a trick?
Right.
If
So
let's say the dolphin doesn't know anything, you're gonna be doing it from
sure.
scratch, perhaps.
Sure.
What would be the process?
Sure. So, and this is a process that you can use with your animals at home too. And the first and the most important part is always that relationship building that you were talking about before. Why am I going to listen to you or follow you around if I don't know who you are and I don't realize that you have good stuff for me? Right. So, say you're an intern, you have to start your relationship with this animal who might know hand signals and might know other trainers. That's another way that they'll test you. One of my favorite stories, my good friend was asking Maya for her flip. And it was very clear signal. You have your left hand up, like you're saying some sort of pledge, and then you smack your own hand, right? It's like a high five to yourself. And Maya would look at him and then go do literally anything but a flip. And it was only for him. I would stand right next to him. He'd point her to me. I would ask her for it, flip, just fine. So there is this like sense of like, you got to get hazed by the animals first, but it really comes from relationship building, right? So once Marcus was able to really show Maya, like, hey man, when I'm around, good stuff happens. You get fish, you get your favorite toys, you get to play with games, you get to play games. Or when I'm around, you don't have to do anything and we can just hang out too. And I can just give you your fish and, whatever. That is kind of how a very oversimplified version of it, but just that repetition of like, I equal fish, I equal fun, I equal, what you want to do. Sometimes it's up to you what you want to do. You don't have to always do a list of behaviors when I come around. Sometimes we just hang out and over time that association, right? So then you start with something small. Most of the interns, most of the new trainers would start with like maybe 3 behaviors a week that they would ask for. So in the case of teaching a brand new behavior, one that the animal doesn't have in their repertoire, they don't know a hand signal for yet, you haven't maybe even come up with a hand signal yet for, it's a little bit different of a process. You wouldn't want to ask an animal that you don't have a relationship with to learn with you, right? And so the biggest, I think, underlining kind of lesson that I learned was short bursts, keep it short, keep it fun, end it on a good note. And that, let me tell you, is relatable to humans too. Okay. That's another like way that I adopt learning for myself. And so maybe I was training Maya how to do a tail walk, which is where they pump their tail. They stand up straight in the water and they pump their tail and kind of look like they're walking across the water, right? And so she might already know how to follow a target pole, which is something you probably have seen if you've been to a zoo. They use target poles with all kinds of animals now, which is amazing. It looks like, in a dolphin's case, a buoy, and then it's just a pole. It might be a fishing pole, it might be just a piece of PVC, but there's that buoy that you might see like dividing the lanes of a swimming pool. And
Hmm.
they touch it, they get a fish, right? They touch it, they get a fish. They touch it, they get their favorite toy. They touch it, whatever. We also have the whistle, which is a bridge. And that in training language basically means that is bridging the time from when the animal did the exact thing you asked them to do and when they're going to get their reward, right? So if a dolphin is out in the middle of the pool, I can't fling a fish at them and tell them that they did a good job, right? The whistle helps to bridge that time to, hey, that was correct, come back to me, you'll get a fish. That was correct at that moment of time. That height, that movement, that time. You're capturing it is what it's called. So so again, Maya might know to touch the buoy. So then the next step is to follow the buoy, right? Maybe I'm just walking right next to her and she's following it. We might do that for a day or two and maybe 5 minutes at a time. And then maybe a little higher out of the water. I'm holding it, like you can see what I'm doing, holding it up a little further out of the water. So she has to come up out of the water a little. Her chin is pointed straight up. Maybe that's the criteria that I'm looking for just then. The chin has to be straight up, not in front of you, but straight up. And we'll do this over a series of weeks to where she's out of the water fully. Her belly button is out of the water. Maybe that's the criteria. Yes, dolphins have belly buttons. And then the longer and the longer. And speaking of longer and longer, you get a longer target pull because you want them to go away from the deck, right? You don't want them to be doing this next to the deck. You want them to go out across the pool towards the audience, towards the amphitheater, also where it's safer. They're going to crash down. They don't they don't have
Yeah.
hands to catch themselves. So it's this process of building and kind of shaping the behavior over time. And then there might be a hand signal that is already associated with that behavior for other dolphins that you have to adopt. In that case, it was kind of a pushing hand signal. Or while you're training a brand new behavior that no one's learned yet, there might be a hand behavior that you're just kind of doing and you don't even realize it, that is then easier to adapt because the animal's kind of seen you do it and you've associated it with that behavior too.
Mhm.
So for instance, Marcus, again, my friend, taught Maya to waggle her tongue out of her mouth, and he kind of had this like fishy hand behavior that she would toss her head
Yeah.
around and waggle her tongue. So that's a really abbreviated version. If folks want to learn more about behavior shaping, one of the best resources is a book by Karen Pryor, who actually I think just passed away this year. Pryor, and it's called "Don't Shoot the Dog." She was a marine mammal trainer, and she talks how you can take this positive reinforcement training method and apply it really to anyone, even people. Sometimes even the scientists I work with now, sometimes they don't know that I'm reinforcing them for making eye contact or giving me a good answer on camera. So
Very cool. Is there any other memorable experiences that you had as a dolphin trainer that comes to mind?
oh man, there's so many. It was just such a wonderful time. We had such a great group of humans. And it was a really interesting time. Like I said, we went away from doing the shows and people had really big feelings about that. The public was very mixed, right? Some people were like, "Oh, well, good, because those are cruelty." And that's something we can kind of get into. There is this idea that trainers are making dolphins do something, and that's just not how it works at all. And whether or not they should be in human care, that's a much bigger question, and that's a totally fair question and conversation to have, right? But there were also people that were like, "What do you mean there's no shows? Like, I want to see the dolphins flip and do things. Like, this is boring, whatever." So it was a hard time to be a trainer and just be getting berated by people that were kind of upset on both ends of this opinion
Yeah.
spectrum. But at the same time, there were so many good interactions with people where we had folks. Baltimore City is the home of Johns Hopkins Medical Center. There are people that come to Johns Hopkins from all over the world to seek treatment that they just can't get anywhere else for different kinds of cancers, different kinds of, whatever maladies out there, sometimes those are little kids. Sometimes there are people that don't speak a word of English. And to be able to have a moment with those folks is very special, and even kids that just live around the corner. I think that was what meant the most to me. Baltimore City, it's come a long way and it has a lot of issues just like any big city.
Mm.
And one of those issues is there's a real disconnection between the folks that live in the city and the environment, right? So we would have kids come to the aquarium for their free, you know, aquarium field trip through the public city school and not realize that they lived 4 blocks from a river that fed into the Chesapeake Bay. Had no idea. Never seen a raccoon before, let alone seen a dolphin. So having interactions with kids, whether they were there visiting on field trip or volunteers through inner city schools, get up close with animals that like we're lucky to see if we go to the beach on vacation for a week in the summer, right? Like it is not
Yeah.
something that a dolphin's going to come up to you in the ocean and be like, "Hi, let me tell you about myself. Here's all my features and here's my whole body out of the water for more than a second." No, that doesn't ever happen, right? So it is right. It would be great if it did, but it is such a privilege to have these animals in the best care possible. There's a lot of issues with that facility. It's very old. It needs to be replaced, and like I said, there's always a question of, are we doing the best we can do for them? Is it even right to have them in human care? Well, while they're here, how can we do right by them? It's a privilege to have them here, to share the magic that is the ocean, that is the waterway right at the end of this block, because dolphins can be seen in the Chesapeake Bay. They can be in the Inner Harbor sometimes, with someone who ultimately their behavior can impact that animal's ecosystem, right? If I can have kids or even adults here and talk about how, hey, when we litter, when we choose to use bad stuff on our lawns to get rid of dandelions or whatever, these animals are ultimately the ones that pay the price. Their food source goes away or the water condition is bad for their skin, whatever it is. It's just, you can't take that opportunity. You can't miss that opportunity to draw the connection. It's not just about like the dolphin does flips and I got wet. And so it was always those interactions that really meant the most to me, especially as a native Baltimorean and Marylander that grew up going to that aquarium too. So
All right. I did read about Dolphin Gemma. I don't know if you've seen this, but apparently it's a AI that's supposed to decode dolphin vocalizations. I don't know if you've heard about it or what you think.
I've heard a
What's up
little,
with that?
heard a little bit about this, and I'm all for it. I mean, how better to learn how to care for these animals that are in our care? And I talk about that because I want to make it crystal clear to listeners that you cannot release marine mammals, especially into the wild, that have been raised in human care. You cannot do it. They will not succeed. They don't know how to feed themselves. They've never seen a live fish, let alone do they know how to catch it. They would have to deal with pollution, rampant plastic pollution and other pollution. They have to deal with, entanglement from fishing gear. They have to deal with war, all kinds of stuff. So it's just not a realistic thing. It's crueler to release them to the wild. And if you want an example of that, the killer whale that played Free Willy, his name was Kiko. The world decided they were going to free Willy for real, and they put him in a sea pen in the North Atlantic. He was living in Mexico at a facility. A good facility? Probably not, but there were other options probably, and they decided this is what would happen. They trained him to catch fish, but ultimately they ran out of money because he was not an attraction anymore. He was not doing interactions, and so that's what they had to do. They had to go back to doing interactions. They had to go back to doing behaviors on cue to raise money, to do special events with people that had money that could give them money. Eventually, Kiko was released and he died, I think, a year later of pneumonia and of malnutrition. He was seen often in harbors in, I believe it was Norway, asking for food, looking for interactions from humans. So I'm so sorry to go that dark, but it's a reality about, like I said, the conversation that we're having here. So all the way back to the AI part is that what better way to learn to care for the animals that we already have in human care that we have to continue caring for the rest of their lives than from them themselves. So I'm personally like, I think that's a really great application for AI. And I think it's really realistic that, we could actually learn stuff. I wish I knew more about the project itself, but I know that I listen to dolphin vocalizations all day long, and they're definitely saying stuff. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's probably curse words. So
Okay. And we're going to get more into that soon, but I have another question I'd rather go on to for a second here. Dolphins are only a handful of species that can recognize themselves in a mirror, along with humans, great apes, and elephants. Did you ever witness this self-awareness behavior while working with them?
absolutely. And so some actually kind of cool correlation here. The National Aquarium in Baltimore is where a lot of that research was done. Dr. Diana Reese would come in, and I actually got to participate in a few sessions where what we would do, we had an underwater kind of room that was maybe the size of like 3 telephone booths, right? I don't even know if people know what those are anymore. Maybe 2 porta pots, maybe, I don't know, but it was very small, and it was between all of the pools, and there was a window into each of the pools. And this is what we called our observation room. This was really helpful for when we had to see how many respirations dolphins were taking if they didn't feel well, or if we did have a pregnant animal, monitoring if they were crunching. We call it crunching and arching because they don't feel good and they're trying to like, oof. When you see the pregnant ladies and they're pushing their back out, and they're just like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable. So doing those medical observations as well as behavioral observations as well. There's baseline observations that you do to know, oh, who is hanging out with who right now and what's this one's favorite toy. So she would go down with a big plexiglass mirror that fit into this window that blocked us out entirely. It was only mirror. And what she would do is she would use a wax pencil to put a mark, usually right over their eye, and where they could really see it on their melon, and just like a black line. And how they know that they recognize themselves in the mirror is because the dolphins would be swimming past, and they might see the mirror and come over and kind of check it out. And scientifically, how do you know that they're registering that that's them? Because when they swim past and they see that mark, they stop and go, wait a minute. And they're looking at it and they're like, what is that? Like, I don't remember that being there. So wild, right? So that's how they do it. And I believe with like elephants, I think they used sidewalk chalk or something like that. And so that's what they were looking for. And how long did they spend looking at it? Did they try to like wipe it off on the wall or on the window? Did they come up close? Did they vocalize while they were looking at themselves? Did 2 come over then and see? I think they usually had 1 at a time in the study. I'm going to correct myself on that. But it was amazing. And so I don't know that I was always of the mind of like, I don't know for sure. Dolphins and, like you said, gorillas and elephants are the only ones, but they're the only ones that we've been able to quantify using observable science like that. I heard many accounts where people talk about their cats and dogs regularly interacting with themselves in a mirror. So super interesting though, really cool. And being able to participate in that was really, really amazing.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this. It says research shows dolphins create unique signature whistles within their first few months of life that function like names. They can use them to
Yeah.
call each other and can remember other dolphins' whistles for over 20 years. Can you tell us about observing that in action?
I can. So, and I think there's even newer research out that says that they start to do this in the womb, and mom interacts with them while they're in the because when you think about it, a body is what, 75% water too, right? So they're able to create some kind of vibration that mimics that sound. Because let's talk a little bit about the physiology for how they're able to vocalize underwater, because as you might surmise, you can't really, I guess you can talk underwater, but how does it work, right? It's mostly your vocal cords that you're hearing. You're not hearing the actual airwaves like, or sound waves and through the air like we are right now. So the way that they vocalize is not with their mouth at all. They can make clicking and popping sounds with their mouth, but at the end of the day, all of the air goes in and out of their blowhole. And their blowhole, think of it almost like when you blow up a balloon and you don't close it off and you stretch that opening and you make all those crazy, like terrible squeaky sounds. And
Yeah, yeah.
if you open it really wide, it's a lower pitch. And if you open it very slowly, it's a really high pitch. So that physiology, they're actually able to manipulate that opening and create different pitches and different sounds. They can make chirps. They can make raspberry sounds, they can make the whistles. So in my experience, I was actually able to listen pretty closely. You can hear them through the walls. It's wild. Yes, sometimes I'd be underwater scrubbing, right? And I'm right there in the next pool over. We would never operate scuba equipment in a pool with them. They would be in the next pool over, but you could hear them. But walking down the stairwell behind the pool, I could hear them. And so I could tell you who was Bo, who was Foster. I could tell you, probably a little bit about what was going on. Like, oh, sounds like Bo's getting chased and he's asking for his mom because mom's in the next pool over. And that sounds like, again, I just want to reiterate, it was necessary to keep him separate from his mom because in the wild, mom kicks them out. Mom is like, I'm sick of looking at you. You're a boy. You don't live here. Get out. So that doesn't mean they're not still mama's boys. So our interpretation of it was like, Mom, get him, Mom. But really it was Bo, Bo, Bo. I'm saying Bo, Bo. So his was a kind of a, I guess I'll try to whistle it, but it was kind of a, so you'd hear that like over and over again. And on a sonar read, you could see the little like Nike check mark of him whistling. And then Foster's sounded a little different. Foster's not related to Bo at all, and his sounded a little different. I can't remember exactly how his went. Bailey had her own, and because those were the three youngest animals at the time, we would hear them the most often. Now that I know more, and like you said, the science has come out, I wish I had paid attention more to like what were the adult females sounds and when did they use them, what context. Maybe they didn't use them all that much because it was always the same animals in the pool. I don't know, but it's so fascinating, and I hope that we continue to learn about their language.
Yeah, so I guess the sounds go through the water pretty easily as when they make it
Much
kind of travels
further
by
and
far.
much faster than through air. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I I have a total bro science theory. That's probably bullshit, but I do think okay, you know how sound affects water, right? And
Mhm,
water actually will move, right?
mhm.
There's that you can do that. So I think that people are affected by music because when they hear it, we're mostly water and actually there's a movement of that fluid within our bodies.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I forget what it might have been the telepathy tapes. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast. Whew, it is life-changing. It is everything woo-woo that you may have ever heard, but the science behind it, and it's breaking my brain right now in the best way. But they talked about sound therapy and how verifiable that it works on people. We hear about it a lot with folks with dementia, right? How they may not be in there, so to speak, to us. It looks like they're just checked out
Right.
or they don't recognize you. They might talk nonsense, but the second you play something from a, important part of their life, it's like they tune back in and they're there for a second or they at least respond physically. I don't think that's bro science at all. I think actually more and more right now we're understanding how true that is. And one of the things she said on this recent episode, she said that our cells actually react to the sound of our own voices. They love it. The way that they respond is this like overwhelming, like, kind of recognition. And I'm not gonna like pretend that I remember everything they said about it, but it's an overwhelmingly positive response when our cells are what we are made up of at the smallest one of the smallest levels recognize our voices and get excited and happy, for lack of a better term, when they hear us, which just breaks my heart for everyone that's ever said like, I hate the sound of my voice, ooh, I don't like recordings of me and blah blah blah. So yeah, just I love that theory and I support you in your bro science theory on
I'll have to
that.
check that. I'll check out the
Yeah.
telepathy tapes. I know it's been
Oh,
referred to me by a friend of mine. I don't know, just never got around to it, but
once you're in it, you're gonna be in it, so just be prepared.
okay. All right, cool. All right. Shout out to telepathy science.
Yes,
Telepathy tapes, right?
telepathy
Okay. All right.
tapes.
I got another question for you here. A 2022 study found that dolphins can identify each other by taste. They swim through each other's urine, yummy, with their mouths open and can tell if it's from a familiar or an unfamiliar dolphin. Didn't you ever observe any behavior like this?
Oh man, this will have to be for the like, the bonus feature behind the paywall because dolphins are freaks. I'm just going to put it like that. But when it comes to that study, I did not know that, but it makes total sense to me. I watched my dog lick plants that other dogs have peed on and it grosses me out. I'm like, dude, You don't need to get that close. I know your sniffer is doing the job here. But yeah, there may be pheromones, there may be like other things happening in that pee that is telling them, I know a lot about with animals in I don't know a lot about animals, but I know I've heard that animals on the Serengeti, they can tell by a female's pee or a spray that that animal is in heat. They're ready to go. They're ready to get, they're ready to breed, right? And so I believe that. But yeah, dolphins are weirdos to the max. They are very they're very social animals. There's no safe way to say this. They're horny. They are horny animals, and they are not shy about showing the world that. There's been so many times where I've had to explain the birds and bees to children because the boys are on display with their favorite toy or the deck wall or whatever. Yeah. So it's they're they don't have hands. There's not a whole lot of ways to get information from their environment and experience things. So oftentimes, yeah, you'll see them like follow an animal right at their vent, which is what we call the like area where their genitalia is. And you're just like, dude, what are you doing? Why? That's so gross. We have fifth graders in the amphitheater right now. Like, come on, So, and people may not know the anatomy of a dolphin, but people know the general area of where things are. And so yeah, I've seen a lot, man. I've seen a lot of things. So that doesn't surprise me in the least.
Hilarious. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of people have seen the show Flipper. I only saw it a little bit, but can you tell us about your opinions on that show? It's real,
Yeah.
fake? What's going on?
So that was one of the first. I think that was the first instance of a dolphin being, in human care and trained for anything. I think because of Flipper, there became marine parks and places where you could go see dolphins and other marine mammals on exhibit. So a lot of people have a lot of big feelings about it. And, even the person that played the boy in the show, he got really involved in like activism after leaving that show and growing up and, going through his life. And so yeah, there's a lot of big feelings associated with that show. But at the end of the day, it's a show, right? Like that's like the one thing you should take away from Flipper and any other movie or show, even documentary sometimes that feature marine mammals and dolphins, is that it's not real life. It's not what it's made out to be. There's so much work going on behind the camera. And that's with any animal, right? You always see that message at the end of movies, like this movie was made without cruelty towards blah, blah, blah. And it's because you have these amazing trainers behind the scenes that are training the dog to look vicious on cue, or they're training the horse to limp on cue or something like that. And in the cases of marine mammals, it's kind of the same thing. Parrots too oftentimes get misrepresented. Like it makes it, I don't know, movies make it look like parrots, you can have a whole conversation with them, right? But really, parrots just learn to mimic. They can only really repeat what they hear the most often. It's not always something that is situational. There are examples of extremely smart parrots that, we can talk about, but most of the time they're just going to say whatever gets the biggest reaction out of you, right? So with Flipper, yeah, it was the first of its kind. So there's just all kinds of things that just are not done the same way anymore. It's all positive reinforcement. And actually, like a really good example of TV is not real life. The Flipper sound, the famous Flipper sound, I'm not even gonna try to replicate it. Maybe you can find a clip of it somewhere, is actually the sound of a Australian kookaburra, which is a kingfisher, the largest species of kingfisher, played backwards. Because people recognize the kookaburra sound because it's been used like kind of like a monkey sound in like The Wizard of Oz, for instance. Like anytime there's a jungle, you'll hear a kookaburra sound, which is hysterical because kookaburra are from the Northern Territory, which is a very dry, not jungle-like place. And what they did was they reversed it, and I think they may have sped it up or slowed it down a little bit, and that is the Flipper sound. So that's just a little small example of how not everything on TV is real life. So yeah.
Hopefully, well, maybe we'll play it after I get the editing done here. All right. What's a common misconception people have about dolphin training?
Oh man, so kind of like I said at the beginning, a lot of people would say to me, "Oh, that's such a cool job. You just get to play with the dolphins all day." And that is not the case at all. You have to be highly qualified. You have to have a 4-year degree. You have to have paid experience most of the time to even get in the water, it's usually some facilities are different, but our facility, it was almost a year, sometimes 6 months before you got in the water with an animal. And then your day is mostly cleaning, disinfecting, scrubbing algae, getting into the water to clean the pool from underneath. It is record keeping, is setting up for the next day so that the team in the morning is set up for success. It's cleaning toys, it's talking to the public. There's so many other responsibilities like we talked about before. So that they don't really put that in the brochure, I feel like, when it comes to
Yeah.
oh, so you want to be a dolphin trainer. But yeah, I think it's closer to manual labor than it is to a science, like a degree holding, if you will, job.
And I think that scuba is somehow involved here too. I don't think we mentioned that before. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think most facilities require a scuba certification, and it's not because you're going to get in the water necessarily with the animal with your scuba gear on. In fact, that can be super dangerous, because we're not water, we're not marine mammals. If that regulator comes out of our mouth, not good, right? Or something is bumped on the tank. So in most cases, you're not in the water at all while scuba with marine mammals in particular, because they are, like we said, they're smart, right? If I'm in the water with a sea turtle, they're probably going to come ask me for what I have in my little yellow bucket if I have lettuce for them or something like that. But they're not going to pop my regulator out of my mouth to see what happens for fun. That's more marine mammal territory. But it is a good idea to have to get certified, because in an aquarium scenario, one, you're somewhat involved taking care of the facility. I think it is different now. That is one thing that's definitely changed. When I was a trainer, we were required to get in the water and handle hydraulic scrubbers that were about as big around as a trash can lid and weighed between 30 and 40 pounds and had a whole lot of pressure turning that brush. So what a workout. You are holding this thing up, going up vertically a 24-foot pool wall to clean it. I don't even know how to describe it because there's no experience like it. Now they don't have their trainers do it, thank goodness, because that is contractor diver level work that someone should be getting paid $25-$30 an hour to do. I think they have a team now that comes in that's specialized volunteer divers, or maybe even paid. I'm not sure, but it is still, you might still have to get in to make sure that nothing's broken. You might have to go in and just make sure that the habitat is safe. I really liked getting in and playing with kids at the window. That was my favorite thing to do. But and I'm sure somebody on the other side, because this is like the famous joke that everybody says when they go to a zoo or an aquarium and they see a keeper in the exhibit. Well, that's a weird looking dolphin, right? So I've actually caught myself making that joke before at another zoo, and I immediately said to the keeper, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just did that." But yeah, it's a good thing to have. Also, because in an aquarium scenario, even in the zoo, it's a small community. It's a small place, and at the end of the day, you're all animal caretakers. So if the fishes team needed help while one of their exhibits was under construction, I was actually volunteering. Sometimes I got paid, depending on what was going on at the aquarium at the time, to go wrangle the sea turtle away from the contractor divers who are wielding underwater welding torches and fixing something in an exhibit, because to her, they're in the water. That means snack time, right? That's when divers get in, I get fed. So it was my job to keep her busy with shell scritches and snacks and things like that. But also, to help out with any kind of like health stuff that's going on or maintenance stuff that's going on in other exhibits. So it really is like a team player thing too, to be certified.
Yeah. Shell scritches. You're saying that
Yeah,
if you scratch a shell, they can feel anything
they
through the
can.
shell?
So, and that's like a big myth, right? We all seen the cartoons where the turtle gets out of its shell and it's taking its little shower and it's, it puts the shell back on. But actually, their spine is fused to the inside of that shell, which is made out of essentially the same stuff as your fingernails and your hair. And so there are nerves that go through it. And you'll see a lot if you just YouTube, like, baby tortoise and toothbrush or sink or something, you'll see them and they like go back and forth and they're like, yeah, that feels good. That's the spot. It's very cute. So the sea turtle was
Very cute. All right. So I know that you did competitive powerlifting before. So was that before or after getting involved with dolphin training?
it's really funny because it was after. And not only powerlifting, I got into strongman, which is the sport you might see on TV at Christmas where the giant sweaty guys are pulling trucks and putting giant like redwood logs over their head and stuff like that. I transitioned from powerlifting into that too, and honestly, it was very familiar. I was like, wait, I've done a lot of heavy stuff. Even your scuba tank weighs 70 pounds, so it's a lot of picking up oddly shaped heavy things to move them, restraining an animal for a medical, you know, thing, picking up uh heavy waterlogged toys, and then of course that scrubber head, fighting with a scrubber head and a current from an outflow vent in a giant, an 11-foot 12-foot pool. Let me tell you, the sensation of sweating underwater is weird. Yeah, you're like in a wetsuit and the water's cooler because it's in the 70s.
You're in the
which is
wetsuit. I see.
right,
Yeah.
but then you get sweaty in the wetsuit underwater. It's a very strange sensation. It's very weird.
So what's the most weight you were able to lift?
So
In what
as a
fashion
yeah.
also? I'm curious.
Yes. So for probably about 15 minutes, I shared the Pennsylvania state record for a stone, Atlas stone lift. And an Atlas stone is like almost perfectly round concrete ball, essentially. And they come in different sizes, and depending on what they're made of, they can be different. Even a small one can be quite heavy. And there's a technique you use to pick it up and put it over usually a bar or up onto a platform. And I think the one that I got up and over was 240 pounds. Then my
Jesus.
heaviest, yeah. Then so it's basically like if a football player, was in the fetal position, I was able to pick him up and put him over a bar, if you will. And then deadlift, that same competition, they had what was called I think it's just called 18-inch deadlift. So you're not lifting it from the ground like you would with a barbell at the gym. It's a wagon wheel instead of a regular weight plate, so you're lifting it from about right under your kneecaps, or right at your kneecaps, I think. And that same competition, I was so mad because they were doing weight jumps, so you couldn't just like at the gym like, oh, I'm gonna throw 5 more pounds on. They were doing weight jumps, so I lifted 495 pounds in a deadlift, and I was like, can we just throw a few more pounds so I can say I did 500? And they're like, no, the next weight jump is like 540 pounds or something like that. And I was like, okay, never mind. I don't want to do that. But yeah, that was really fun. I can't remember if I held a record for that, but the sport has grown so much. That was in 2022. The sport has grown so much. Women are just killing it. It's amazing to watch. Records are getting smashed almost every year because women are realizing we're strong as shit and we've been doing these hard jobs for a long time. And it's amazing to see. I'm super proud of the fact that I held that record for a hot second, but I'm really happy that it's continued to get, smashed.
Well, isn't there
by
something
new women.
scientific about being better pain management, perhaps?
Yes.
In females?
Oh my gosh. We could do a whole other episode about that. Yeah. So I was in it. My coach, she coached me from afar, but she is I think she might still hold the title of Europe's strongest middleweight woman. So that means between I can't remember quite what the low end of the range is, but the upper range is 180 pounds. So you can't, if you weigh more than 180 pounds, then you're just in the heavyweight class, right? So she is a pro, literally a pro. She goes on their versions of like Good Morning America in Germany and like whatever else. She is on reality TV shows. She's done, I think, a couple Guinness World Record things. She's the real deal. So she was coaching me, and I was in the gym, especially during the pandemic when there wasn't a whole lot else to do. I was in the gym like 2 to 3 hours, 4 and 5 days a week training. And so I also put on a lot of weight during that time. I don't know if it was like pandemic. It was also muscle, to be honest with you, but pandemic, just like I gained weight, but I probably never felt better body wise. I was tired a lot, and then there's some training days where I felt like I got hit by a truck, but my joints definitely better since I've kind of stepped away from the sport. Just it's where I live now. It's harder to find a gym that has all the stuff that you need. My joints hurt so much more now that I don't have the muscles supporting them. So actually it's funny because I went back to the gym this week. Thank you very much. And that is the goal. It's like, okay, ankles, okay, knees, I hear you. All right, we'll get back in there. So.
Yeah, good job. Get back in there. And then you have a podcast.
I
The
do.
Blue Collar White Coat.
Yes.
What's that about?
Oh my gosh. It is, again, that's why we're pals, because we have the great minds, right? So my podcast is a little more niche in that the folks that I'm talking to about their jobs are somehow related to STEM. I guess the catchphrase is I'm talking to the human side of STEM, the people who power science. And yes, sometimes when you think of that, you might hear that and think like rocket scientist. You might think, marine biologist, something like that. But also, we're going to talk to, hairstylists. We're going to talk to, I've already talked to a mortician in my most recent episode. I talked to a mortician. This is someone that does the business side, does the religious side, does, you know, one would argue some therapy work to folks that come in, but also has a degree, an associate's degree in mortuary science. So they have to take chemistry, they have to take biology, they have to take physiology, all those things. So it's a show really about showing us how science is really in our everyday life. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I didn't like science in high school. I didn't, science is not for me. I'm not good at science. It's more in your life than you realize. And science is for everybody. You have a seat at the table. So let's talk about it. So that's the show, Blue Collar White Coat, the first season. And I've talked to a shark scientist, and I've talked to, like I said, the mortician, and I've talked to someone that works at NASA. So definitely check it out. You can find us at Blue Collar White Coat Pod, all one word, on Instagram and TikTok. And we have a YouTube. I'm still getting it going, still chugging along, getting it going, but it's the same thing, Blue Collar White Coat Pod. And yeah, you can find us anywhere that you get your podcasts.
Right. Everybody should check that out. And then your final question, what's a secret that most people would not know about being a dolphin trainer?
I think I've given that secret away several times, but I think it's that it's just so much more than you think it is. It's, being in public relations, it's being type A organized. There's a lot of hard science involved, but there's a lot of nuanced social interactions involved. And there's a lot of physical labor involved too. So that job title is a misnomer because you do so much more than train the dolphins.
Yeah. All right. Amy Weldon, I'm so glad you came back on. You are officially the only person who's been on the show 2 times. All right, Amy, thanks for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks again for having me.
And that was Amy Weldon, dolphin trainer, told us everything about being a dolphin trainer and what really happens. She's the only person to come on here 2 times, so I really appreciate her taking time out of her busy day to get on here. And if you enjoyed this content, please leave a like, a subscribe, a comment down below. And if you think you have an interesting job, then email me at talesfromtheshippodcast@gmail.com, and I'll get you on here. Talk to you later.